My name is Vanessa, and I never thought I would end up in a situation that would completely turn my life upside down. It all started the day I decided to move in with my husband, Michael, and his family. Michael had been my college sweetheart, the kind of man everyone would describe as caring, ambitious, and completely devoted to me. We had been together for 6 years, and I always assumed that marrying him would be a smooth transition into the kind of life I had always dreamed of. I imagined love, respect, and support, but what I did not imagine was the storm that awaited me the moment I crossed the threshold of his family home. His mother, Gloria, was a woman whose presence filled the room with authority. She had this way of speaking, of glancing at you, that made you feel like your very existence could be judged in an instant. I thought, maybe I am overthinking it, maybe first impressions are always sharp. But the first impression wasn't just sharp, it was a full-on clash. On my very first day, after unpacking a few of my belongings, I introduced myself properly, with warmth and smiles. Michael had warned me she was strict, but he never mentioned how cutting her words could be. Within hours, she referred to me as nothing more than a servant in front of everyone. The word struck me harder than any blow, and I felt my stomach drop. "You'll do the chores, right? You know this is my house, not a hotel." Those words, intended as a casual command, echoed in my mind in ways I couldn't shake. For days, I tried to adjust, to prove that I wasn't just another intruder in their home. I cooked meals, I cleaned, I kept the house spotless, hoping that perhaps over time she would see my dedication. But the harder I tried, the sharper her words became. She mocked me subtly in front of my husband, undercut my suggestions, and found a way to make every small mistake feel monumental. One evening, I had spent hours preparing a special dinner, trying to surprise Michael with his favorite dishes. I brought the tray to the table, and Gloria took one bite, smiled thinly, and said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "Well, maybe the maid will get it right next time." The humiliation cut deep, and Michael just sat there quietly, unable, or unwilling, to defend me. I realized quickly that no matter how many times I tried to please her, it would never be enough. Every compliment I sought was met with sarcasm, every effort dismissed. I began to feel trapped, stuck in a position where I had no voice, no recognition, no identity. It was as if my existence in that house was meant solely for performing tasks she deemed appropriate. But I couldn't allow myself to crumble. I had to hold on to some sense of self, some piece of dignity that wasn't dictated by her moods or her judgment. Then came the day that changed everything. I had been quietly managing my personal finances, a small savings account I had built up over the years. I never flaunted it, never mentioned it, because in a household where appearances mattered more than truth, it was safer to stay under the radar. Gloria, however, had a way of sensing things she wasn't supposed to know. She had cornered me in the kitchen one afternoon, asking about my background in a way that felt more like an interrogation than a conversation. She raised her eyebrows and smirked when she found out I had a checking account that was entirely separate from anything Michael had ever seen. Her expression shifted the moment she saw the numbers. The smirk fell, her eyes widened, and for a brief instant, the air in the kitchen changed. There was a crack in her armor, a vulnerability that I had never witnessed. The woman who had belittled me in front of everyone, the woman whose words had cut me daily, suddenly looked smaller, more human, and undeniably caught off guard. That moment, simple as it seemed, sparked something inside me. I realized that while she had power over appearances, she did not hold power over my life or my choices. I had control over my future, and for the first time, I felt the thrill of independence mingled with the quiet satisfaction of having a secret strength. From that day, things began to shift. Gloria's subtle digs became less frequent, and I noticed her observing me with a mixture of curiosity and caution. She still spoke sharply, still tried to assert dominance, but her words no longer carried the weight they once did. Michael noticed too, though he never admitted it outright, the way I started to carry myself with more confidence. I no longer felt the same fear that had pinned me down for weeks. I had discovered a power she could never take away, my own. Yet, this was just the beginning. The revelation of my bank account wasn't just about money, it was about identity, autonomy, and the recognition that no one could define me without my consent. I had learned that strength isn't always loud, sometimes it's quiet, strategic, and revealed in moments when you least expect it. I had learned that dignity is not given, it is claimed. And that realization set the stage for everything that would follow, battles I never asked for, confrontations I never imagined, and a journey that would redefine who I am entirely. Looking back, that first shock, that moment when Gloria's face turned pale after seeing my account, was the first crack in the wall that separated me from freedom. I didn't know it then, but the days ahead would test me in ways I could never anticipate. I would be challenged, pushed, and pushed again, but each step would reveal a side of me I didn't know existed. A side that would refuse to be silenced, a side that would demand respect, not just from her, but from anyone who tried to underestimate me. And as I reflect on that day, I understand that true power often comes quietly, from within, in the moments when the world expects you to bow, but you rise instead. Enjoying the story? Subscribe for more. From that moment onward, I began observing everything in the house with sharper attention. I noticed how Gloria interacted with Michael, how she controlled conversations, and the subtle ways she tried to influence every decision. At first, I had assumed that the house was simply a place where I had to survive the daily judgments. But soon, I realized it was a chessboard, and every interaction was a move she calculated meticulously. I had two choices: remain a passive piece on her board or learn the rules quickly and start playing strategically. I decided to play. Not with anger or confrontation, but with observation, patience, and small victories that built my confidence. I started managing small household affairs with efficiency that even Gloria could not ignore. When groceries were mismanaged, I quietly corrected it. When Michael's office documents were misplaced, I organized them. Each time I acted, I made sure to do it in a way that demonstrated competence without challenging her authority openly. It was subtle, but I could see her noticing. There were glances that lingered a little longer, and words that carried less sting than before. One afternoon, the situation escalated. Gloria had invited some of her friends over for tea, a casual gathering on the surface, but for me, it was a stage of scrutiny. I was tasked with preparing everything, as usual, and I made sure every detail was perfect: the cups polished, the table arranged flawlessly, the pastries baked just right. I carried out my duties silently, but Gloria had decided to make an example. "Vanessa, make sure you don't mess this up. Remember, appearances matter," she said with a thin smile that didn't reach her eyes. The guests arrived, and as I served them, I felt a calmness I had never experienced before. I was no longer shaking under her gaze or anticipating ridicule at every step. I had rehearsed everything mentally, anticipating potential criticism, and had a strategy to handle it with grace. One by one, the guests complimented the presentation, the food, the ambience. Gloria's lips pressed into a straight line, her usual smirk gone, replaced by a tight tension. I saw it in her eyes: surprise, disbelief, and something else, respect, faint but unmistakable. That evening, after everyone had left, Gloria confronted me privately. She closed the kitchen door behind her and stood there, arms crossed, her posture rigid. "I didn't expect this," she admitted, her voice lower than usual, almost vulnerable. I nodded politely, acknowledging her words without arrogance. She studied me for a long moment, then asked, "Where did you learn to do all this?" I smiled gently, choosing my words carefully. "Experience, attention to detail, and a desire to do my best," I replied. There was no arrogance, only quiet confidence. For the first time, we had a real conversation that wasn't about control, ridicule, or judgment. It was brief, but it was a crack in the wall that had always separated us. I realized that her harshness wasn't entirely personal, it was a shield, a way she maintained power over her household. I understood that to navigate this family, I had to continue moving carefully, building my credibility while preserving my dignity. Meanwhile, Michael remained somewhat oblivious to the undercurrents of tension. He still treated me kindly, but I could tell he had not fully grasped the subtle manipulations taking place. I decided to keep him partially shielded, handling minor conflicts on my own. It wasn't about keeping secrets, it was about protecting the peace while I strengthened my position. With each passing day, I grew more adept, more confident, and more aware of my ability to influence the household without direct confrontation. Then came a turning point. Gloria had planned a family dinner with extended relatives, a grand affair where everyone's eyes would be watching, judging, and forming impressions. I had anticipated this moment, planning meticulously, the menu, the decorations, the timing of each dish. When the evening arrived, everything went flawlessly. Compliments came not only from relatives but also from Michael himself, who looked at me with pride in his eyes. Gloria, however, was silent initially, her usual sharp comments absent. I could see her weighing her words, calculating whether she could still assert authority without undermining the success I had orchestrated quietly. By the end of the night, something had shifted. She approached me as the last guest left and said simply, "You handled this well. Better than I expected." It wasn't a full admission of respect, but it was progress. I realized then that power isn't always about loud victories or dramatic confrontations. Sometimes, it's the small, consistent steps, the quiet mastery of situations, and the patient accumulation of credibility. I had begun to claim my space without overt rebellion, and that strategy was more effective than I could have imagined. But the challenges were far from over. Gloria had a network of influence, subtle manipulations, and expectations that I had yet to fully navigate. I understood that my financial independence, the account that had shocked her, was just one piece of the puzzle. Real power required strategy, patience, and emotional intelligence. I began observing not just her actions, but the dynamics between everyone in the household, Michael, his younger brother, even the household staff. Each interaction revealed new insights into the hierarchy and allowed me to act in ways that strengthened my position while keeping dignity intact. As days turned into weeks, I realized I was no longer just surviving, I was thriving quietly, strategically. Gloria's attempts to belittle me became less frequent, less effective, because I had learned to anticipate, to respond with calm, and to assert myself subtly. The household was still hers, yes, but I had carved out my corner, a space where I could be seen, respected, and independent. The revelation of my bank account had been the catalyst, but the real transformation was internal. I had discovered resilience, strategic intelligence, and a voice that could not be silenced. Looking back now, I understand that the journey had just begun. That initial shock, her pale face, and the first moments of self-realization were only the start of a series of events that would challenge my patience, test my courage, and ultimately teach me the full extent of my own strength. I had learned that dignity and power aren't given, they are claimed, moment by moment, decision by decision, quietly, strategically, and with unwavering resolve. Make sure to tell in the comments where you are listening from. The weeks that followed tested me in ways I had never anticipated. Gloria, despite her grudging acknowledgement of my capabilities, was still a master of subtle manipulation. She began placing challenges in my path, ones that required not only skill but emotional intelligence to navigate. One evening, she asked me to reorganize the house records, a task that seemed straightforward on the surface. But as I delved into the files, I realized she had purposefully left incomplete information, expecting me to make mistakes. I took a deep breath, reminding myself that this was not just about completing tasks, it was about proving competence under pressure. I reorganized the files meticulously, anticipating every possible error and correcting them before they could even be noticed. When Gloria reviewed my work, her eyes widened again, just slightly, and she muttered, almost under her breath, "Well, this is impressive." I didn't respond, only smiled politely, letting my actions speak louder than words. It was a small victory, but in the silent battles of control and perception, it was monumental. I could feel the shift in her demeanor, subtle but undeniable. My quiet victories were beginning to redefine the way she viewed me, even if she wasn't ready to admit it openly. At the same time, I had to navigate the complicated dynamics with Michael's younger brother, Aaron. Aaron was unpredictable, charming one moment, dismissive the next. He tested my patience constantly, making offhand remarks about my new money lifestyle, assuming I had no experience beyond what he had witnessed. But I quickly learned to respond with calm humor and quiet confidence, never letting his provocations undermine me. Each interaction with him was a lesson in patience, strategy, and maintaining dignity under pressure. By the end of those tense afternoons, I found myself increasingly adept at handling not only Gloria but the household as a whole. One day, Gloria announced she had invited a prominent business acquaintance over, someone whose judgment she valued greatly. She subtly hinted that my role in hosting and organizing the meeting would be scrutinized. I knew that this was another test, another opportunity to prove myself. I spent hours planning the seating, preparing refreshments, and ensuring that every detail reflected competence and professionalism. When the guest arrived, I managed the entire encounter flawlessly, navigating social nuances, anticipating needs, and addressing issues before they became problems. By the end of the evening, Gloria's usually sharp remarks were absent. The guest complimented the household's organization and management, and I could see Gloria's internal struggle. She wanted to assert control, yet she couldn't find fault. Later that night, she pulled me aside and said quietly, "You handled that perfectly. I didn't expect you to manage it so well." I nodded, acknowledging her words without arrogance, and felt a surge of quiet satisfaction. I had begun to claim respect in a household that had once belittled me at every turn. This period of subtle victories also revealed unexpected truths about Michael. He had been supportive, but now I realized he was learning to trust my judgment more, witnessing firsthand how I could navigate challenges without confrontation. He began consulting me on household matters, small decisions at first, and then larger ones. I felt a growing sense of partnership that was grounded not just in love, but in mutual respect and acknowledgement of my capabilities. However, Gloria's influence was still pervasive. I knew that despite my progress, she could still find ways to undermine me if I let my guard down. One morning, she deliberately assigned me conflicting tasks, testing my ability to prioritize and manage time under pressure. Instead of panicking, I calmly assessed the situation, created a plan, and executed it efficiently. Each completed task became another silent statement: I was capable, resilient, and not easily intimidated. By now, I had begun to see the broader picture. My financial independence, the bank account that had initially shocked Gloria, was more than just money. It represented choice, security, and the ability to navigate life on my terms. I realized that my competence and strategy in handling the household were extensions of that independence. Gloria's authority could not diminish the self-assuredness that had grown within me. Despite the tension, there were moments of subtle alliance forming. Gloria began observing me differently, occasionally seeking my input on small household matters. It was never explicit praise, but the change in her approach was undeniable. She had begun to recognize that while she held the title of matriarch, I had become an indispensable part of the household dynamic. Her subtle acknowledgement was a signal that my strategy of quiet competence was working. At the same time, I continued to cultivate my relationship with Michael, strengthening the bond that allowed us to function as a unit despite the challenges around us. We began communicating more openly, sharing concerns and victories in a way that reinforced mutual respect. His increasing reliance on my judgment reinforced the sense of empowerment I felt, a sharp contrast to the initial days of constant belittlement. As I reflect on those weeks, I understand that this period of subtle victories was critical. It was not about overt confrontation or dramatic displays of power. It was about observation, strategy, patience, and consistent execution. Each successful task, each measured response, each moment of calm under pressure built a foundation that Gloria could not easily dismantle. I had learned to navigate her influence without losing myself, to claim respect without confrontation, and to strengthen my sense of self while remaining within the family's complex dynamics. The transformation was quiet but undeniable. I was no longer the timid newcomer, the maid in her eyes. I was Vanessa, a woman who had discovered inner strength, strategic intelligence, and resilience. I had learned to navigate power subtly, to anticipate challenges, and to assert myself without hostility. And as the days passed, I knew that more trials awaited, but I was ready. I had discovered that real strength lies in patience, observation, and consistent action, and I was prepared to face whatever came next with confidence, dignity, and resolve. Enjoying the story? Subscribe for more. The weeks following my subtle victories introduced challenges I had not anticipated. Gloria, sensing that her influence over the household was gradually being balanced, began to escalate her efforts in indirect ways. She would schedule last-minute guests, rearrange events, or give contradictory instructions, all seemingly minor, but each designed to test my composure and decision-making. I realized that these weren't random acts, they were calculated, subtle attempts to see if I could maintain the confidence and autonomy I had quietly established. One morning, she asked me to coordinate a community charity event she was hosting. The task appeared straightforward, but I quickly noticed discrepancies, conflicting schedules, missing materials, and unclear expectations. Rather than reacting with frustration, I meticulously analyzed each detail. I created a timeline, assigned responsibilities to staff, and prepared contingency plans. By the day of the event, everything ran seamlessly. Guests complimented the organization, volunteers worked efficiently, and the event was a visible success. Gloria's reaction was a brief, almost imperceptible nod, but I felt the quiet acknowledgement of my capability. Michael, observing from the side, finally started to express open admiration. He would comment on my ability to manage chaos without stress, noting that he had never seen anyone handle such complexity with such calm precision. These remarks, though subtle, fueled my confidence. I realized that while external recognition was validating, the real power came from my internal assurance, the understanding that I was capable of excellence even under scrutiny. Gloria, however, was not finished testing me. She began placing obstacles in my personal interactions within the family, trying to provoke disagreements and conflict. Aaron, her youngest, started making sly remarks about my spending habits, my choices, and my role in the household. Previously, such comments would have unnerved me, but now I approached each interaction with a calm, measured response. I addressed his concerns diplomatically, deflecting tension while maintaining my dignity. Over time, his remarks became less frequent, less pointed, and eventually, he began to consult me for advice, acknowledging my growing influence. The transformation was subtle, yet undeniable. Gloria's authority, while still present, was no longer absolute. My presence in the household had shifted from that of a passive figure to someone whose competence demanded recognition. This realization was empowering, but I knew the journey was far from complete. True influence required consistency, foresight, and the ability to anticipate challenges before they manifested. Then came an incident that tested me like never before. One evening, Gloria confronted me about an alleged misplacement of an important family heirloom. The accusation was sudden and public, intended to humiliate me in front of Michael and the household staff. My heart raced, but I forced myself to remain calm. I asked her for specifics, calmly retracing the steps I had taken that day. I systematically demonstrated where each item had been placed, and with quiet confidence, I showed that the accusation was unfounded. The tension in the room was palpable, but Gloria had no counter-argument. The heirloom had been misplaced elsewhere entirely, beyond my control. That night, after the confrontation, Michael whispered words of support, acknowledging my grace under pressure. The staff, too, expressed quiet admiration for my poise. I realized that in high-stakes situations, composure and rationality carried more weight than any argument raised in anger or panic. My independence and strength were becoming evident to everyone, even to those who had once doubted me. In the weeks that followed, I began to exercise more subtle influence over household decisions. I initiated small improvements, reorganizing schedules, streamlining chores, and creating efficient systems for daily operations. Each improvement, while practical, subtly demonstrated leadership and competence. Gloria, recognizing the positive outcomes, began seeking my opinion on matters she would have previously handled alone. While she maintained her role as matriarch, our dynamic was slowly evolving into one of mutual, albeit cautious, respect. I also took the opportunity to strengthen personal connections within the family. I engaged more openly with Aaron, building rapport through shared interests and small acts of guidance. I reinforced my bond with Michael, ensuring that our partnership remained strong and collaborative. These relationships were essential, not only for household harmony but also for solidifying my position as an indispensable member of the family unit. Amid these developments, I kept my financial independence intact. My bank account, once a source of tension and shock, now symbolized empowerment and choice. Gloria never again questioned it, perhaps realizing that it was not something to confront but to accept. This financial security allowed me to navigate the household with confidence, knowing that I had options beyond the control of others. By the end of this period, I had transformed the way the household functioned. Small victories, strategic actions, and consistent poise had shifted the balance of power. Gloria, once an intimidating force, now interacted with me differently. Her attempts at manipulation were met with calm assertiveness, and while she retained authority, she acknowledged, silently, the new equilibrium that had been established. The journey had taught me a crucial lesson: strength is not always loud or confrontational. It is measured in patience, foresight, and the ability to maintain integrity under pressure. It is built in moments of quiet resilience and executed through consistent action. I had learned to navigate complex family dynamics without losing myself, claiming my space with dignity, and asserting my influence subtly yet effectively. As I reflect on these months, I understand that this was not merely about surviving or managing the household. It was about mastering the art of presence, influence, and self-assuredness. Gloria's challenges, once overwhelming, had become opportunities for growth, demonstrating that power and respect can be earned through strategy, composure, and unwavering resolve. I had discovered a side of myself I never knew existed, a woman capable of navigating any storm with quiet strength and strategic intelligence. Make sure to tell in the comments where you are listening from. Life in the household began to shift more noticeably after those months of subtle victories. Gloria, while still maintaining her matriarchal presence, started to show signs of tentative respect. She would consult me on minor decisions, like rearranging furniture or scheduling meals. Moments that were once opportunities for her to assert dominance, now became instances where my opinions carried weight. It wasn't open praise, and she never admitted any personal change, but her behavior revealed a silent acknowledgement: I was no longer just the newcomer. The balance of power, once heavily skewed in her favor, began to feel more even. I had learned to anticipate her moods and actions, and I discovered that responding with measured confidence rather than defensiveness made her less likely to challenge me openly. My strategy was subtle, never overtly confrontational, but consistently effective. I began keeping a mental map of family dynamics, noting relationships, patterns, and triggers, which allowed me to navigate tense situations without losing composure. One morning, an unexpected opportunity arose. Michael's company faced an urgent project, and he asked for my help in organizing his schedule and preparing documents for key clients. It was the first time he had relied on me in such a professional capacity, and I embraced the challenge. I organized meetings, created detailed summaries, and even suggested improvements that enhanced workflow efficiency. Michael was impressed, and even Gloria noticed my contributions, though she did not verbally acknowledge them at the time. That evening, Gloria attempted to test me once again. She deliberately created a minor household crisis, a missing delivery that was technically my responsibility to confirm. I calmly traced the situation, contacted the supplier, and resolved the issue before it escalated. The relief on Michael's face was immediate, and for the first time, Gloria didn't find a word to criticize. I realized that I was not only surviving these tests, but turning them into opportunities to reinforce my credibility and composure. My relationship with Aaron also evolved. He had previously been dismissive, occasionally sarcastic, and somewhat skeptical of my presence in the household. Over time, I demonstrated reliability and subtle authority, guiding him in minor matters and providing constructive suggestions without seeming controlling. Eventually, he began seeking my advice, and I noticed a quiet respect growing where once there had been doubt. Each interaction reinforced the sense that I was no longer merely accepted, I was valued. At the same time, I was careful to maintain boundaries. While Gloria's respect was growing, I knew it was fragile and contingent on my consistent demonstration of competence and poise. I avoided unnecessary confrontations, stayed focused on my goals, and ensured that my independence, financial and emotional, remained intact. My bank account continued to symbolize more than money. It was freedom, security, and proof of self-reliance, a quiet statement that no one could diminish my autonomy. One evening, a family emergency arose when Michael's cousin unexpectedly arrived and required assistance with personal matters. Gloria looked to me, almost instinctively, for guidance on handling the situation. I coordinated effectively, anticipating needs, resolving conflicts, and managing everyone involved with calm authority. Even Gloria, usually quick to interject, allowed me to lead. This moment was pivotal. It demonstrated not just competence but influence. I had begun to operate as a central figure in the household, one whose decisions mattered. Despite these victories, I remained aware of potential challenges. Gloria was strategic, capable of subtle manipulations, and aware of her social influence. I had learned to anticipate her moves, but I knew vigilance was necessary. I continued observing, planning, and acting strategically, ensuring that every step I took reinforced my position while maintaining household harmony. Each successful navigation of tension strengthened my confidence and self-assurance, proving to myself that I could thrive even under scrutiny. Through these experiences, I realized that empowerment was multifaceted. It was not simply the ability to act independently, but the capacity to influence, lead, and inspire respect through consistent, composed action. My personal growth became evident not only to Michael but also to the household staff and extended family. People began consulting me for guidance, and my opinions carried weight where they had previously been dismissed. Gloria, while never openly admitting it, began to engage with me differently. She still maintained authority, but her interactions were less combative, more cautious, and occasionally collaborative. I observed her learning to accept my competence as a reality she could not easily alter. Each encounter reinforced the delicate balance I had created: respect earned through action, authority acknowledged through consistency, and influence asserted without hostility. By this point, I had fully embraced my role as an active, capable member of the household. My financial independence allowed me the freedom to navigate relationships and conflicts without fear, and my strategic approach ensured that my presence was respected. The woman who had once been belittled, dismissed, and underestimated was now recognized for competence, intelligence, and poise. Looking back, I understood that the journey was not about defeating Gloria or asserting dominance. It was about claiming agency, earning respect, and demonstrating resilience in the face of ongoing challenges. I had learned to turn potential crises into opportunities, criticism into motivation, and subtle tests into proof of my capability. Every small victory had compounded into a powerful transformation. As the days continued, I found myself not only surviving but thriving. Gloria's influence remained, but it was tempered by the undeniable truth: I had become a force in my own right, capable of navigating any household challenge with grace, strategy, and unwavering self-confidence. And while the path ahead was still unpredictable, I now possessed the tools, insight, and inner strength to face whatever trials awaited, knowing that I could emerge with dignity, authority, and a quiet yet undeniable power. Enjoying the story? Subscribe for more. As time passed, the household dynamics continued to evolve in ways I had quietly orchestrated. Gloria, though still protective of her authority, began to rely on me in ways she never had before. She would ask for my input on hosting events, coordinating schedules, and managing minor crises. I noticed a subtle shift in her behavior, a mixture of acknowledgement and cautious respect. She was no longer openly critical, and her attempts to undermine me had all but vanished. This change, while gradual, reinforced the truth I had been learning: consistent competence and quiet confidence are often more powerful than confrontation. Michael, too, had become an active partner in recognizing my contributions. His admiration was no longer private whispers; he would openly acknowledge my role in managing both the household and aspects of his professional life. The sense of partnership between us deepened, built not only on love but on mutual respect and recognition of skill, intelligence, and resilience. I realized that thriving in this environment required not only independence but also the ability to foster collaboration and trust. Aaron, having observed my steady approach to challenges, began to seek guidance on various matters. His initial skepticism had transformed into trust, and I could see that my presence in the household had become a stabilizing influence. Even minor interactions with him demonstrated the ripple effect of consistent composure, respect, trust, and influence built quietly over time. Each relationship I nurtured within the household reinforced my position, proving that leadership often manifests through subtle, persistent action rather than loud declarations. One afternoon, a situation arose that could have been a crisis. A supplier had delivered the wrong materials for an event Gloria was hosting, and tensions were rising. Previously, such a situation would have thrown the household into chaos, with Gloria assigning blame and Michael attempting to mediate. This time, I took the lead. I calmly assessed the situation, contacted the supplier, arranged for corrections, and delegated tasks efficiently. By the time the event began, everything was flawless. Gloria's eyes, for the first time in months, betrayed a mixture of surprise and reluctant respect. I knew then that my presence had become indispensable. Throughout these months, I continued to maintain my financial independence. My bank account remained private but was a silent testament to the autonomy and security I had cultivated. It was no longer a source of shock for Gloria, it was a symbol of the balance of power I had carefully established. This independence gave me the freedom to act with confidence, make decisions without fear of reprisal, and navigate the household with strategic clarity. With each passing day, I noticed subtle changes in the way others interacted with me. Staff members sought advice rather than instructions. Relatives began to defer to my judgment during family gatherings. Michael's recognition reinforced my sense of agency. Even Gloria, while still holding her title as matriarch, treated me differently. She no longer sought to undermine or belittle me. Instead, her interactions carried a quiet acknowledgement that I had earned my place, not through defiance, but through competence, patience, and unwavering calm under pressure. Reflecting on my journey, I realized how much I had transformed. I had entered the household timid, uncertain, and subjected to constant scrutiny. Over time, I had developed skills that extended beyond household management, strategic thinking, emotional intelligence, and the ability to influence and inspire respect without confrontation. I had discovered a resilience and confidence I did not know I possessed, and I had claimed a space in the household that was both acknowledged and respected. One evening, Gloria approached me privately. I braced myself for criticism, but instead, she spoke softly. "Vanessa," she said, "I didn't expect this when you first arrived. You've handled everything with a level of grace I didn't think possible." Her words, simple yet sincere, carried more weight than any past argument or test. I nodded, accepting the acknowledgement without arrogance, feeling a quiet satisfaction that my journey of perseverance and strategy had been validated. That night, as I reflected, I understood the full scope of what I had accomplished. My influence in the household was now undeniable, earned through patience, careful observation, strategic action, and consistent composure. I had learned to navigate complex relationships, maintain dignity under pressure, and assert myself without confrontation. My independence, both emotional and financial, served as a foundation for the authority I had quietly built. Looking ahead, I knew challenges would continue to arise. Family dynamics are never static, and people's expectations and reactions can shift unpredictably. Yet I felt ready. I had cultivated not only the skills but the mindset necessary to respond effectively to any situation. I had proven to myself that true power is not about dominating others but about mastering one's own actions, maintaining self-respect, and influencing outcomes through intelligence, patience, and unwavering resolve. As I sat quietly that evening, reflecting on the months that had passed, I felt an overwhelming sense of accomplishment. I was no longer the timid newcomer, no longer the woman Gloria had labeled with contempt. I was Vanessa, a woman of independence, strategic intelligence, and quiet authority. My journey had been long, challenging, and at times exhausting, but it had forged a version of myself I had never imagined. In the end, the transformation was complete. Gloria's authority remained, but it coexisted with my own presence, my independence, and the respect I had earned. Michael's partnership was stronger, Aaron's trust was solid, and the household had adjusted to a new equilibrium, one where I was no longer overlooked or underestimated. I had proven, to everyone and most importantly to myself, that dignity, strategy, and resilience can overcome even the most entrenched challenges. And in that moment of quiet reflection, I realized the most important truth of all: real strength is not loud or confrontational. It is subtle, unwavering, and consistent. It grows in moments of patience, in choices made with clarity, and in actions executed with calm confidence. I had discovered that power is claimed quietly, but its effects are undeniable, and that is the lesson I would carry with me for the rest of my life. If this story shocked you, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell icon so you never miss a powerful story like this. Don't forget to like this video and share it with someone who needs to hear this. And tell me in the comments, where are you listening from? Make sure to let me know. Also, drop your thoughts below. I read every single comment. See you in the next story.